What's up, guys? Robert Thompson here with the third part of my screenwriting process. The first two parts have been well received so far, and I wanted to keep it going. Unfortunately, it's going to be the last part for tonight. I'm getting tired. I'm doing this while taking a break from writing a script I was hired to do last night. The Adderall's wearing off. No, I'm not an addict, and I'm not taking it illegally. I do have a prescription for ADD. Just to clarify, but it's getting a little bit late. I did want to get into this next part though because I feel like my expectation and my hope is that somebody that really needs it comes across these videos while I'm asleep or while I'm doing something, and I'm trying to get as much done as I can for them and for any of you that are watching. Over here we have the general layout, the details from the last two videos. As I said, this wasn't used for the first video, but it was used for the second part. Cover it from the beginning, basic overview to cover the last two parts that we covered. 1 page of script equals 1 minute of movie. If your movie is not coming out to at least close to a minute, the layout is messed up and you need to focus on that. Fade in, just where you start. Step number 1, first 2 words that go into any script are fade in. Upper right hand corner of page number 1. Average length is 90 pages, would be 90 minutes. 105 pages max. Very likely to be asked to cut that down. 85 to 87 minutes with credits. Minimum 85 minutes with credits is very short. 87 is pushing it with credits, so just keep that in mind as you're cutting. The first part that we covered in video number 2, as I said, it's broken down into 3 acts, a 3-act structure. You've heard that term before. I'm positive everybody who's taken an English class has. Act number 1, or the beginning, is usually about 30 of those 90 pages. Okay, that covers character development, introductions, and inciting incident or motivation. Bringing you up to speed, we have here 6 main characters for the sake of it being a slasher film that we're writing. This is not an actual script I'm writing. This is simply for an example. It's about Ted Bundy, famous serial killer, infamous serial killer, whichever. Ted Bundy, and then you have the 5 ancillary characters or supporting characters. You have his girlfriend Sharon, who is actually the lead, Miguel, Andy, Beth, and Jacqueline. I do go into details on part 2 about what those characters can be, what the rules are to them for a little bit, what the rules of horror are currently. I don't go into great detail, but it is worth watching that second video to find those out. We set up the inciting incident, the motivation for the movie moving forward. Again, this is not fact. This is something I've taken mostly from Ed Gein, who is another serial killer, or typical Friday the 13th would be with it being a campsite. Cass goes camping, attacked at campsite, could be burglars, could be attempted assault on one of the females, whichever. They threaten to kill them, and Ted Bundy gets the upper hand, kills one of them in self-defense. Murder is not legal. He goes to jail for questioning. They decide that based on his answers, it was self-defense. Based on the support of the witnesses and the experiences of the other kids there, it was self-defense. They let him go. By page 30, the inciting incident, the moment, the come to Jesus moment, if you will, good or bad, Ted realizes he enjoys killing. He has to have that moment, being a serial killer, where it triggers visually for the audience, I love doing this. I'm going to keep doing this. This is not how he became a serial killer. Again, totally made up for the sake of example. If you want to know the facts of Ted Bundy, read up on them. The first 5 to 25 pages of your 30 pages is all about introductions. It could be character to character, character to ancillary character, character to parents, characters playing sports, whatever sets examples and builds these 6 characters up to give you an idea of who they are and what they do. Okay? So, right now you're at page 30 of 90. The next step would be the middle, Act 2. Act 2 is, for lack of a better term, this is the meat of your script. This is going to be the body that carries and keeps people's attention. My generation down, so basically anybody 35 years and under, our attention spans are for shit. Just period. Okay, I think it's down to like 3 minutes or something like that. If you can't keep a 3-minute bit of interest, you lose your audience member. And that becomes even more factual when you take into consideration that most people are watching stuff on their phones now. But for the sake of argument, for the sake of example, we're going to get into what Act 2 is about and assume that your characters are well written enough that they have kept the audience's interest getting to page or to the 30-minute mark. Now, as I said in the last video, you would assume that with it being the beginning, middle, and end, that each section would be 30 pages. It's not the case. And again, this is not an exact science. You can break it down to different lengths, different page numbers equal different minutes. You may have a longer first act. You may have a longer third act. But generally speaking, this is how it would lay out. So, Act 2 is going to usually be about 40 to 45 pages. We're going to make it a little bit longer. 45 pages. So 45, 30, 75, sorry. Blanked there for a second. So you're at 75 out of 90. All right. That's 75 minutes. That's you're going up into and through the climax of the movie. 3-act structure, technically the climax is part of the third act. That's why I said 40 to 45 pages. I tend to prefer, with the way that I build, especially action and horror, something needs to be happening every 5 to 7 minutes. There either needs to be a kill on screen or there needs to be an action sequence play out every 5 to 7 pages. Okay, for the entire second act. So you're talking roughly 8 to 9. Excuse me, I'm going to take care of the dogs for a moment. And I'm back. So 45 pages, that's roughly 8 to 9 action sequences or kills in this movie. Now, as I mentioned, you have the 6 main characters, and then you're going to have at least half of them murdered. But you also have ancillary characters that are not important to Ted Bundy's overall journey in this movie that you kill off too. So, every 5 to 7 pages, you need to have an action beat or a kill. So, that being said, 45 pages for the sake of argument, and to keep it simple for you, we're going to go with 8 kills in this script. It could be a character that we barely even met that just happens to show up as a dead body very late in the movie. Friday the 13th movies did that all the time. It's a very cheap way to add to the body count when you either don't have the time, which is very often the case in low budget, or you don't have the money, which is even more the case in low budget. So 8 kills total, 3 of his friends. Well, actually, we're going to go back here. You know what? I want to make the decision. He's going to end up ultimately killing all 4 of these characters. Just for whatever reason. For main, for ancillary. Yeah, so it doesn't have to be exact. As you write the pages out, you don't have to have a kill on page 35, 40, 45, 50. It doesn't have to be exact. You just have to find a way to fit the bodies in within the confines of your story. Okay? Ultimately, and again, this is a slasher movie. It's not a forgive me, the word escapes me. I'm trying to think of it. It's not a psychological thriller. That's what I was thinking of. It's not a paranormal story. It's not a mockumentary. This is a slasher movie. We want to tell a version of Ted Bundy that's not been frequently told. And this is a made-up story about his descent into madness. And that's the period, that's the incident, the motivation we are using from this point forward. What gets him to kill the school janitor? Let's say it's set in high school before he becomes the Ted Bundy that we know. What gets him to kill the school janitor? Or why does he kill, let's say a girl is picking on Sharon through most of the first act and into the second one, really spiteful, being just being awful to her, and she winds up dead. She's another one of the bodies. So you have 4 of the main cast that go one way or another. And then what I would do is this. In the middle of the movie, in the second act, you want to build on the story beats that you set up earlier in the movie. You can introduce certain other story beats, but your key ones you want to build on from this point forward. Your motivation from this point forward is Ted's descent into monstrosity, okay? Ted Bundy wasn't always a monster. He wasn't always a killer. He wasn't always the man was prolific, okay? I remember being little when he was still alive in prison and hearing about him because he was that terrifying. He was a living boogeyman. Jeffrey Dahmer, John Wayne Gacy, same as them. So what we're doing with this slasher movie, what we've decided to do is tell the story of Ted Bundy like you've never seen him. And we've done our research. We've figured out all the details to make a story make sense. And this is his 90-minute descent into the Ted Bundy that we know. Okay? You have, let me check their names again, Miguel and Andy. Miguel, Andy, witty is a subjective term. I take a great amount of pride in being able to include humor in other genres, comedy in other genres. And the thing about that is that people give a lot more leeway when not being offended if it's a horror movie that happens to have comedy in it. Witty is the term that I use to basically say Miguel and Andy are the comedy sidekicks, for lack of a better term. Comedy sidekicks aren't as prevalent in today's horror. Again, current rules against former rules. It is what it is. The comedy sidekick kind of went out with Randy in Scream 2. Rest in peace. But that doesn't mean that you can't have fun or be funny. You can. People go to slasher movies to see blood, boobs, and to laugh. Ideally, you want them to laugh at the jokes you've written into the script, not at the quality of the movie. So, you have to be careful here. My characters always make jokes. It's just become second nature to me. Inappropriately so. But if you're not comfortable writing comedy, if you're not comfortable mixing it, then just do away with the witty aspect of these characters, Miguel and Andy. They can be different sort of sidekicks, more reserved. Their deaths, however, need to be brutal. They need to be on camera. They need to be shown. Then you have Beth and Jacqueline. As I mentioned, they were, for the sake of running with this example, they are the whores of the group. At least one of them some rules have changed, some rules stay the same. Sex sells is a rule that stays the same and maintains. One of these two characters needs to die while mid-sex. Very common in the Friday the 13th movies. Halloween movies use it. it works. Their death can be off camera for the most part. You can cut away and use different editing techniques to cut around it so that you don't have the expense of the makeup. But it's not about the death in that one instance, okay? And if you can get them to be topless, ladies, I'm sorry. Sex sells. Breasts still sell horror. It's just a fact. You pay for that. If you can get one of them to be that way, to expose themselves. Excuse me. Other can die off screen. Found. Other can die off screen, but found by page 70, let's say 63 minutes into the movie. By 63 minutes, you have Sharon very concerned about Ted's descent mentally. Think of this as a much shorter version of The Shining. Okay, the main character starts losing his mind, and he becomes more and more unhinged as the movie goes. She's very concerned about him, doesn't address him directly about it, but she has her reservations and her beliefs about how off he's become. 63 minutes into the movie, she opens a closet door, and there folded up inside is Beth's body with her head twisted around. Okay, whatever. Just giving an example. She screams, stumbles back. At that point, 63 minutes, 63 pages into your script of 90 pages, you can have the reveal. She stumbles back, bumps into something soft that she understands is somebody behind her, turns around, and Ted, blank face, arguably possessed if this was a possession movie, just staring at her. He's clearly lost it, has blood on him, weapon in his hand. From this point forward, you have reached the climax, which goes into the third act of the movie. Also, by this point, I said page 63, that might be pushing it a little bit, a couple pages, because I did mention the other bodies, so she would have to either find those bodies, or those kills would have to be shown happening prior to page 63. If 63 were when you had the reveal, okay? So that's what I'm going to call the start of the climactic sequence. Is the big reveal, whatever that reveal may be. In this instance, in our example, that is, Ted Bundy has been killing the people that she thought he cared about, his best friends. This guy that she cared about, that she loved, is no longer that person. That Ted Bundy is, as of this moment, dead. The big reveal is the moment when you realize the hero is actually the villain. And you move forward from there. So, all these bodies, you have 8 bodies total by page 70, 75. I'm going to bump that up from page 63 to page 70. That way we have enough room to have the bodies or death scenes of all 8 people before this. And then page 70, Beth is found. Beth is the last body. Sharon backs up away from her body, screaming, crying, upset, obviously, bumps into somebody behind her, turns around. Big reveal, Ted is the killer. He's lost. To her, to the world, to normalcy. He is Ted Bundy as we know him from this point forward. The other way I would put that is there's a moment where there's no turning back. All right? At any point through any of this, Ted could have stopped, turned himself in, paid the price, but at least turned himself in and been honest about it and said, you know what, I made mistakes, I'm sorry, I'm guilty, and so on and so forth. He could have paid for his crimes willingly and kept, if nothing else, potentially kept her respect in doing so. I'm not talking about real life. That's not the case in real life. You're screwed. But within the movie, if she loves him enough, she'll forgive quite a bit, even if he's sitting in jail the rest of his life. The big reveal moment is the moment that there is no turning back. The hero, in this case Sharon, sees in Ted's face in that moment, in the shot that you get of his face, that the Ted Bundy she loved is dead. No turning back for this character whatsoever. And that leads into the climax, which is the moment. Climax is the sequence of fighting back. We've watched for the last 50 pages, 45 pages, Ted Bundy slash his way through his friends and a few other characters and stuff. We wrote a few good death scenes, and we're content. We get up to this point where she meets and realizes that Ted is the killer, and the easiest way I can break down the climax for you is the climax is the end-all be-all of fight sequences within your movie. Okay, it's the kill scene within a slasher movie where the killer doesn't quite finish the job. Or if it's an action movie, for example, The Raid, was when the two main characters fought Mad Dog. Sorry. The Raid is the three-person fight sequence towards the end. That is the climax of the movie. That is we are going to spend every dollar we have left on blood, on fight choreography, on where this movie is going to end with him damn near killing her, but her ultimately kicking his ass somehow. And again, I said climax can start in the second. Climax is technically third act, okay? For sake of your edification, climax is third act. I tend to start it earlier because my climaxes run long. either way, it's the same thing. It's still the same sequence. It just starts earlier. So you get to the climax, and that's, page 75 out of 90. So she found Beth at page 70. Page 75 is when the climax really needs to pick up and take off. We'll get into the ending portion, the third act, in the next video. Thanks.